He walked out of that interview with $2 in his pocket and a heart heavy with failure. Marcus Harper, a single father who had just been humiliated by the hiring manager, thought it was the end of the road. He didn't know that 20 floors above the most powerful woman in New York City was watching the security feed her hand, trembling over the phone. He thought he was just another rejected applicant. He had no idea that he held the key to $1 billion secret, and that Victoria Blackwell, the CEO of Blackwell Industries, was already sprinting for the elevator to catch him. This wasn't just a story about a job interview. It was about how one moment of dignity changed everything. The reception area of Blackwell Industries smelled like money. It was a scent composed of polished mahogany, cold air conditioning, and the faint, intimidating aroma of espresso that cost more than Marcus Harper's entire outfit. Marcus sat on the edge of a mid-century modern leather sofa that squeaked every time he shifted his weight. He tugged at his cuffs. The suit was charcoal gray, bought 5 years ago for his wedding anniversary. It was tight in the shoulders now, and the fabric had begun to shine at the elbows, but it was clean. That was the best he could offer. He checked his watch. 2:15 in the afternoon. Sophie's school let out at 3:30. If he didn't catch the 2:45 bus, he'd be late, and Mrs. Gable, the aftercare coordinator, would give him that look, the one that said, "We know you're struggling, Mr. Harper, but please don't make it our problem." The glass bowl on the reception desk held peppermint candies wrapped in cellophane. Marcus glanced at the young woman behind the desk. She was absorbed in her phone thumb, scrolling with mechanical precision. He reached forward, palms sweating, and took 3 candies. Not because he wanted them, because he was hungry. The half slice of toast he'd shared with Sophie that morning had burned off hours ago, and his stomach was eating itself. He unwrapped one candy quietly, the crinkle of plastic sounding like thunder in his ears, and slipped it into his mouth. The sharp mint exploded against his tongue, momentarily drowning out the gnawing emptiness. If he got this job next month, Sophie would have a real birthday party. Not the sad grocery store cupcake he'd bought last year, with a single candle, the two of them singing in their basement apartment while the neighbor upstairs yelled at his television. A real party, maybe at the park, maybe with friends from school, maybe with a cake that had her name on it in frosting. The memory hit him without warning. Rachel in the hospital bed, her hands skeletal in his, the fluorescent lights making her skin look like wax. Her voice had been a whisper, but the words had cut deep. "Promise me don't ever let Sophie see you give up." He'd promised. He'd kept that promise through 3 years of hell. 3 years of rejection letters and overdrawn bank accounts, and nights when the only thing that kept him from screaming was the sound of Sophie's breathing from the other side of the curtain that divided their one-room apartment. "Mr. Harper." The voice was nasal and bored. Marcus looked up to see a young assistant holding a tablet, not even bothering to make eye contact. "Yes, that's me." Marcus stood too quickly. The dizziness hit him, a wave of gray static across his vision. He steadied himself against the arm of the sofa, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Mr. Cross will see you now. Glass room on the left." Marcus took a breath, clutching his worn leather portfolio. Inside was his resume, a document that looked like Swiss cheese full of holes where his career used to be. Just be honest, he told himself. Integrity doesn't cost anything. He walked into the glass-walled office. The view of the Manhattan skyline was breathtaking, a jagged jaw of steel biting into the gray sky. Sitting behind a desk that looked like a slab of black ice was Trevor Cross. Trevor didn't look up. He was scrolling through his phone, his thumb flicking with rhythmic indifference. He was younger than Marcus, maybe late 20s, wearing a bespoke suit that screamed arrogance. "Sit!" Trevor's eyes never left the screen. Marcus sat. The silence stretched for 30 seconds, then 40. The leather chair beneath him was so expensive it didn't creak. Finally, Trevor dropped the phone onto the desk with a soft thud and picked up Marcus's resume with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. Marcus Harper, former project lead at Kincaid Logistics, graduated with honors. Impressive start. "Thank you. And then, nothing for 3 years." Trevor's eyes scanned the paper with clinical detachment. "The last entry on your resume is from 3 years ago, Mr. Harper. That's a significant gap in our industry. AI-driven supply chain management has fundamentally transformed logistics in that time. Have you kept current with developments in autonomous routing algorithms, predictive analytics, blockchain integration for shipment?" Tracking. Marcus felt the heat rise in his neck. He had practiced this. He knew the gap was the problem. I took a sabbatical for personal family matters. My wife fell ill with leukemia. I became her primary caregiver until she passed, and then I took time to stabilize my daughter's life. But I'm ready to return. I've kept up with industry certifications and Trevor laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was sharp, dismissive, a sound that cut. Caregiver. Trevor repeated the word as if tasting something sour. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Look, Marcus, can I call you Marcus? This is Blackwell Industries. We don't just compete, we dominate. We need people who live here, who sleep under their desks if necessary. You have what? A daughter, Yem. Sophie. She's 6, right. A kid, a dead wife, a 3-year gap. Trevor tossed the resume back across the desk. It slid over the polished edge and fluttered to the floor, landing face down on the marble. Marcus froze, staring at the paper. He thought about picking it up. He thought about begging. He had rent due in 4 days. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, had already given him the final warning. If he didn't pay, he and Sophie were out on the street. But then he thought of Sophie's face when she'd asked him that morning, "Daddy, are you going to be the boss today?" The hope in her voice. The trust. "You're damaged goods, Marcus." Trevor's voice was casual, almost friendly. He crossed his arms, leaning forward slightly. "You're a liability. What happens when the kid gets the flu and you have to leave early? What happens when you get sad about the wife and cry in the break room? We're not running a charity here. We need people who are all in. You're clearly not." Marcus stared at the resume on the floor. His chest tightened. Every word Trevor said was designed to humiliate, to break him down, to make him feel small. And it was working. The edges of his vision blurred. But beneath the shame, something else stirred. Something hard and sharp. "My wife didn't just fall ill, Mr. Cross." Marcus's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. He stood slowly, planting his hands on the expensive desk and leaning in. "She fought a battle harder than anything you will ever see in this office. Caring for her didn't make me weak. It made me resilient. I learned to manage crises you can't imagine on 3 hours of sleep. I learned to prioritize, to endure, to execute when everything is falling apart. I might be damaged to you, but I'm the strongest man you'd ever hire. But you're right about one thing, I don't belong here. Not because I'm not good enough, but because you aren't." Marcus turned and walked toward the door. His legs felt unsteady, but he kept moving. "Walk out that door, and you're blacklisted in this city." Trevor's voice rose, the first crack in his polished facade. "I know everyone. You'll never work in logistics again." Marcus didn't look back. He reached for the handle, his hand shaking. His mind screamed at him to stop, to apologize, to grovel. But his body kept moving. He pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He had his dignity, but dignity wouldn't buy Sophie dinner. He walked toward the elevators, pressing the down button, his reflection staring back at him from the polished steel doors. What have I done? The thought was a scream inside his skull. I just tanked the only interview I've had in 6 months. Meanwhile, inside the boardroom adjacent to Trevor's office, the blinds were angled just enough to see through, but not in. Victoria Blackwell had been standing there for 5 minutes. She was 42, impeccably dressed in a white power suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She was known as the Ice Queen of Wall Street. She rarely smiled, and she never ever tolerated incompetence. She had been visiting the HR floor to conduct a surprise audit of hiring practices. The audio feed of Trevor's office piped into her earpiece, crystal clear. She stood perfectly still, watching Marcus's retreating figure through the glass, her hand gripping the tablet so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her chief of staff, Roger, stood nervously behind her, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Shall I have security escort him out soon?" Blackwell or Roger's voice was tentative, uncertain. Victoria didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the resume lying on the floor of Trevor's office. She zoomed in on the tablet she was holding, which mirrored the security camera feed inside the office. She saw the name Marcus Harper. Then she saw the previous employer, Kincaid Logistics. But it wasn't the work history that made Victoria's blood run cold. It was the address listed at the bottom of the page. 42 Oakmont Laney, Apartment 4. Victoria dropped the tablet. It hit the carpet with a dull thud, the screen going dark. Roger stepped forward, alarmed. Miss Blackwell, are you all right? Victoria's hand flew to her chest. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. The monitor on the wall showed the hallway camera feed. Marcus was stepping into the elevator, head down, shoulders slumped. The doors began to slide shut. That man, where's he going? Roger glanced at the screen. The elevators. Ms. Blackwell, he's leaving. Stop him. Victoria's voice cracked, sound Roger had never heard in 10 years of working for her. She spun around, grabbing her purse from the conference table. What do you want me to? Should I call security number? Victoria's response was sharp, almost frantic. She tore open the boardroom door, her heels clicking against the marble floor. I need to catch him myself. Evelyn, you have the board meeting in 10 minutes. The investors from Dubai are waiting in the let them wait. Victoria was already halfway down the hall, her voice echoing off the glass walls. If that man gets on that elevator, Roger, you're fired. Everyone's fired. She ran. Victoria Blackwell, the woman who walked with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator, was running down the hallway of her own building. Her heels struck the floor in a frantic staccato. She reached the elevator bank just as the metal doors kissed shut. Through the thin gap, she saw Marcus' head bowed, looking at something in his wallet. He didn't see her. The elevator was soundproof. Hold the door. Victoria slammed her hand against the steel, but it was too late. The car was descending. She watched the numbers light up above the door. 40, 39, 38. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She pressed the button for the executive elevator, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her key card twice. It can't be him, she thought, her mind racing back 7 years back, 15 years back, to a life she thought was gone forever. It's impossible. Isabel disappeared. She changed her name. She vanished. But that address, the memory hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was 15 years old again, standing in the sunlit garden of the Blackwell estate in Connecticut. Her mother, pale and thin from the cancer that would take her a year later, pressed a silver locket into Isabel's hand. Isabel was 12, her dark curls tied back with a ribbon, her blue eyes wide with confusion. Why are you giving me this, Mama? Her mother's voice had been weak but firm. Because one day you might need to run. Your father is a hard man, Isabel. If he ever tries to force you into something you don't want, you go to Oakmont Lane. It's yours. The trust is hidden, untouchable. No one can take it from you. Promise me. Isabel had promised. And 15 years ago, when their father had tried to force Isabel into marriage with David Morrison, a business partner, twice her age with a reputation for violence, Isabel had vanished. Victoria had searched. She'd hired the best private investigators money could buy. She'd spent millions, and she'd found nothing. Isabel had become a ghost. The executive elevator arrived. Victoria jumped in and hit the button for the lobby. As the car plummeted downward, she checked her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked terrified. Her mascara was smudged, her lipstick uneven. She wasn't chasing a potential employee. She was chasing a ghost from her past. A ghost who might hold the only thing she had ever truly loved and lost. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a descent into hell for Marcus. By the time the doors pinged open, the adrenaline of his speech to Trevor had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard pit of dread. He walked through the pristine marble lobby of Blackwell Industries, keeping his head down. He could feel the security guards watching him. In his mind, they knew. They knew that he was the man who had just been laughed out of the building. The man who couldn't provide. He pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. As if the universe were finalizing the joke, the sky broke open. It wasn't just rain. It was a deluge, a cold gray sheet of water that instantly soaked through his thin suit jacket. Marcus didn't have an umbrella. He didn't have money for a cab. He checked his phone. Battery 4%. And a text message from Mrs. Gable at the school. Sophie is the last one here again. Mr. Harper, please hurry. The janitor needs to lock up. Marcus let out a guttural sound of frustration, wiping the rain from his eyes. He started to jog toward the subway station, his cheap dress shoes slipping on the wet pavement water, seeping through the worn soles and soaking his socks. Every step was a reminder of how far he'd fallen. Mr. Harper. Marcus? The voice was faint over the roar of the traffic and the rain. Marcus ignored it. He assumed it was a hallucination or someone shouting at another. Marcus, another Harper. There were thousands of them in this city. Marcus Harper. Stop. This time the voice was closer, commanding, and desperate. Marcus slowed down and turned around. Running toward him, weaving through the crowded sidewalk of rushing pedestrians, was a woman, but not just any woman. She was wearing a white suit that was quickly becoming translucent in the rain. She had lost one high heel a few yards back and was limping, running half-shod on the dirty concrete. It was the woman from the hallway, the one he'd glimpsed on the elevator screens. The CEO. Marcus froze, panic flared in his chest. Did I break something? Did Trevor call the police because I raised my voice? Victoria Blackwell caught up to him, gasping for air. Her hair, once perfectly coiffed, was plastered to her face. She looked manic, unhinged. She bent over, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Mr. Harper, you walk fast. Marcus took a step back, holding his portfolio like a shield. Look, I'm leaving. I didn't steal anything. I just told your manager the truth. If he wants to sue me for hurting his feelings, he can get in line behind my landlord. Victoria looked up, water dripping from her eyelashes. She didn't look angry. She looked terrified. No, I'm not here to sue you. I'm Victoria Blackwell. I own this building. I own the company. I know who you are. And I know I'm not welcome here. So if you'll excuse me, I have to pick up my daughter. Wait. Victoria lunged forward and grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers digging into the wet fabric of his jacket. You can't go. Not yet. I need to ask you something. Let go of me. Marcus's voice rose, drawing stares from passing pedestrians. A billionaire CEO gripping a soaking wet, unemployed man in the middle of a storm. People slowed down, phones coming out. I'm going to be late for Sophie. At the mention of the name, Victoria flinched as if she'd been slapped. Her hand loosened but didn't let go. Sophie. Her name is Sophie. Yes. Now let go. Where is she? Where is your daughter right now? That is none of your business. Marcus yanked his arm free, anger overtaking fear. You people, you think you own the world. You think because I'm poor you can just interrogate me on the street. Go back to your tower, Ms. Blackwell. Leave us alone. Marcus turned and sprinted toward the subway entrance, his shoes splashing through puddles. Behind him, Victoria's voice cut through the rain. I can get you there faster. Marcus stopped. He looked at the subway stairs. The train would be delayed because of the storm. It would take him 40 minutes, maybe more, to get to Queens. He looked at his phone. 3:45. He was already late. Sophie would be sitting alone in the school hallway, small and scared, wondering if Daddy had forgotten her. A sleek black Maybach screeched to a halt at the curb, cutting off a taxi. The back door flew open, and Roger, the chief of staff, jumped out holding a massive umbrella. Ms. Blackwell, my God, you're freezing. Roger rushed to cover Victoria, but she waved him off, ignoring the umbrella. She looked at Marcus, her eyes pleading. Get in the car, Marcus, please. I will drive you to your daughter. I promise I won't ask any questions until we get there. Just let me help you. Marcus looked at the warm, dry interior of the car. He looked at Victoria, who was shivering violently but refusing to break eye contact. He thought of Sophie sitting alone on that little plastic chair in the school hallway, her yellow raincoat too big for her small frame, her backpack clutched in her lap. If you make me late, I don't care how much money you have. I will lose it. Get in. Marcus climbed into the back seat of the Maybach. Victoria followed, and the heavy door sealed them off from the noise of the city. The interior of the car was quieter than a library. The leather seats were heated, and within seconds, Marcus could feel the warmth seeping into his frozen bones. Roger sat in the front passenger seat, looking back nervously at his boss. Victoria sat opposite Marcus, facing backward in the spacious cabin. She accepted a towel from Roger and dabbed at her face, but she didn't fix her hair. She just stared at Marcus. Where to, ye? The driver's voice was calm, professional. St. Jude's Elementary in Queens. Take the tunnel. It's faster. The car glided into traffic, moving with an authority that other cars seemed to respect. Horns didn't honk at them. Taxis yielded. Marcus watched the city blur past the tinted windows, his mind racing. Here. Victoria reached into a hidden compartment and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. She handed it to him. I'm not thirsty. Marcus's voice was flat, though his throat was parched. He didn't want to owe her anything. Why are you doing this? Did you see the interview? Is this a guilt trip because I don't need charity? I need a job. But I'm guessing Trevor made sure that won't happen. Derek is a fool. Victoria's voice was soft, controlled. He's been terminated. I fired him about 3 minutes after you walked out. Security is escorting him from the building as we speak. Marcus blinked, his grip on the portfolio loosening. You fired him because he failed to recognize value and because he lacks humanity, but that's not why I'm here. Victoria leaned forward. Her hands were trembling again, the towel slipping from her fingers. Your resume, it listed an address, 42 Oakmont Lane. Marcus stiffened. A knot formed in his stomach. That was our old place. We had to downsize after Rachel died. We live in a basement apartment in Astoria now. Why do you care about my old address? That house belonged to a trust, a private trust managed by a law firm in Switzerland. Did you know that number? Marcus frowned at confusion, replacing suspicion. We rented it from a property management company. Rachel found it. She loved the garden. She said it reminded her of. He trailed off, the memory too sharp to finish. Reminded her of what. Victoria pressed her voice tight. Her childhood home. Marcus's voice cracked. He looked down at his hands. Look, what is this about? Did we miss a rent payment from 3 years ago? Is that why you're here? Victoria took a deep breath. She reached into her purse, the soaked leather creaking, and pulled out a small silver locket. It was old, tarnished, and hung on a delicate chain. She held it in her palm, staring at it as if it were a live grenade. Marcus, what was your wife's maiden name? Daniels. Rachel Daniels. Victoria closed her eyes and a single tear escaped, tracking through the rain on her cheek. Daniels. She kept the fake name. Fake name. Marcus sat up straighter, his pulse quickening. What are you talking about? Rachel didn't have a fake name. She was an orphan. She grew up in foster care in Ohio. Is that what she told you? Victoria opened her eyes. They were a piercing, icy blue, the exact same shade of blue that Marcus saw every morning when he looked at his daughter. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked at Victoria's eyes. He thought of Sophie's eyes. No, the word came out as a whisper. That's impossible. My sister's name was not Rachel Daniels. Victoria's voice broke the carefully constructed walls crumbling. Her name was Isabel Blackwell. She ran away from home when she was 19 because our father, didn't approve of the man she loved. He threatened to destroy him, so she vanished. We hired investigators. We spent millions. We never found her. Victoria opened the silver locket in her hand. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of two young girls. One was clearly Victoria, maybe 15 years old, standing tall and serious. The other looked exactly like Rachel. Dark curls, delicate features, those unmistakable blue eyes. She sent me this locket the day she left. She told me she was going to be free. And then, silence. For 15 years. Marcus felt the world tilting. Rachel. His Rachel, who clipped coupons and sewed patches onto Sophie's jeans, who sang off-key in the shower and cried during commercials. Rachel, who had loved him with a fierceness that had made him believe in goodness again. Rachel was the heir to a billion-dollar empire. She never told me. She never said a word about money, about family. She told me she had no one. She was protecting you. Victoria's voice was raw, stripped of its usual authority. My father was a ruthless man. If he had known where she was, he would have dragged her back. He would have destroyed anyone who stood in his way. But he's dead now, Marcus. He died 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Marcus repeated the words, his mind struggling to process. That was when Rachel got sick, when the leukemia started. If we had known, Victoria choked back a sob, pressing the locket to her chest. We could have gotten her the best doctors, the best treatments in the world. We could have saved her. I tried. Marcus snapped, defensive anger flaring up to mask his shock. I sold everything. I worked 3 jobs. I held her hand while she died in a county hospital because our insurance maxed out. Don't you tell me you could have saved her. You weren't there. I was. The car fell silent. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Victoria looked at him, not with pity, but with something else, respect, understanding. I know you did. You loved her. That's all she ever wanted to be, loved for herself, not for the name. The car slowed down. They were pulling up to the curb of St. Jude's Elementary. The brick building looked dreary in the rain, its faded American flag hanging limp from a rusted pole. That's why I ran after you. Victoria wiped her face, her voice steadying. I saw the address, that house on Oakmont Lane. It was the only property my mother left to Isabel in her own private will. The trust was hidden, buried in layers of legal protection. Rachel Isabel must have known she could live there safely. Marcus put his hand on the door handle. His head was spinning, the pieces of his life rearranging into a picture he didn't recognize. I need to get Sophie. Marcus, Victoria's voice stopped him. If Sophie is Isabel's daughter, she is my niece. She is the heir to half of the Blackwell estate. Marcus stopped. He looked back at Victoria, his jaw tightening. She's my daughter. That's who she is. And right now she's a 6-year-old girl waiting for her dad in the rain. I don't care about your estate. He opened the door and stepped out into the storm. Victoria watched him go, her hand pressed against the glass. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw Marcus run up the steps of the school, taking them two at a time. A moment later, he emerged holding the hand of a small girl in a yellow raincoat. The girl was clutching a backpack that was too big for her, her other hand holding a crumpled drawing. As they walked toward the car, the girl looked up, pushing her wet hood back. Victoria gasped, her breath fogging the glass. The girl had the Blackwell chin, the dark curls wild and untamed. And those eyes, those unmistakable piercing blue eyes that had haunted Victoria's dreams for 15 years. Marcus opened the car door and ushered Sophie inside, his hand protective on her small shoulder. Daddy, who is this? Is this an Uber? Sophie's voice was soft and certain. She shook off her umbrella, sending droplets of water across the pristine leather seats. Marcus slid in next to her, pulling her close to warm her up. He looked at Victoria across the cabin. The dynamic had shifted. He wasn't the job applicant anymore. He was the guardian of the most valuable person in Victoria Blackwell's world. No, sweetie. This is an old friend of Mommy's. Victoria stared at the little girl, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to reach out to hug the last piece of her sister that existed on this earth, but she saw the protective look in Marcus's eyes. She saw the way Sophie leaned into her father, trusting him completely. Hi, Sophie. Victoria's voice trembled with an emotion she hadn't felt in years. I'm Victoria. I'm going to take you both home. To the apartment, Sophie asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Victoria looked at the damp backpack, at Marcus's frayed cuffs, at the way Sophie's shoes had holes in the toes. We can go wherever your dad wants. But I was hoping you might want to come have hot chocolate at my house. It's big and warm, and I have a picture of your mommy when she was your age. Sophie's eyes went wide, her small hands gripping the straps of her backpack. You knew, Mommy, I did. Victoria smiled through tears, a real smile that felt foreign on her face. I knew her very well. Marcus hesitated. He looked at his daughter's hopeful face. Then he looked at Victoria. He saw the desperation there, the grief that mirrored his own. He saw a woman who had lost something irreplaceable, just as he had. Okay, just for hot chocolate. To the penthouse. Victoria's voice was steady now, the command returning. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the rundown school behind. As they merged onto the highway, Marcus's phone buzzed again. It wasn't the school this time. It was an unknown number. Marcus ignored it, but it rang again immediately. He frowned and answered. Hello, Mr. Marcus Harper. A deep, distorted voice came through the line, mechanical and cold. Yes, who is this? You just left Blackwell Industries with Victoria Blackwell. You have the girl. The voice didn't ask. It stated a fact. Marcus went cold, his free hand instinctively moving to shield Sophie. Who is this? Listen carefully, Mr. Harper. Victoria Blackwell isn't the only one looking for the lost heir. But unlike her, we don't want a family reunion. Get out of that car, now. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, his pulse roaring in his ears. He looked at Victoria, who was showing Sophie the locket, the two of them leaning close together. He looked at the driver, who was focused on the road ahead. He looked at Roger, who was typing something on his phone in the front seat. Stop the car. Marcus's voice was sharp, cutting through the soft hum of the engine. What Victoria looked up, confused. I said, stop the car! Marcus's voice rose, desperation bleeding through. Sir, we're on this bridge! I can't. Just a black SUV slammed into the side of the Maybach with a sickening crunch of metal, sending the luxury car spinning across the wet asphalt of the Queensboro Bridge. The world turned into a violent blur of spinning metal and shattering glass. The Maybach groaned as it slammed against the concrete median sparks, showering the windshield like fireworks. Airbags detonated white explosions that filled the cabin with dust and the acrid smell of burnt chemicals. Marcus gasped, his ears ringing a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. His first instinct, drilled into him through years of single parenthood, was immediate. He threw his arm across Sophie, pinning her back against the seat, even though the car had already stopped moving. Sophie, the word tore from his throat raw with terror. He coughed, his lungs burning from the airbag powder. Sophie, look at me, the little girl was crying, her face pale beneath the yellow hood, but she nodded, alive, conscious. Marcus's hands flew over her, checking for blood, for broken bones, for anything wrong. I've got you. It's okay. He looked toward the front. The driver was slumped over the wheel, unconscious, a thin line of blood trickling from his temple. Roger in the passenger seat was groaning, his nose bleeding, one hand pressed against the cracked windshield. Victoria was pressed against the far door, her eyes wide with shocked chest, heaving as she hyperventilated. Victoria. Marcus barked her name, the authority in his voice cutting through the chaos. Are you hurt? I don't think so. My arm. She lifted her left arm, gingerly wincing. A bruise was already forming, dark purple spreading across her pale skin. We have to move. Marcus's voice dropped to a low, dangerous register. Through the steam rising from the crushed radiator, he could see the black SUV that had hit them. It was parked at an angle, blocking 2 lanes of traffic. 3 men were getting out. They wore heavy dark coats, and one of them was holding something, a tire iron or a baton. Marcus couldn't tell which. They moved with the confidence of professionals who knew their target was trapped. They're coming. Lock the doors. They auto-lock. Victoria's voice was a whisper, her fingers fumbling for her phone. I'm calling the police. No time. Marcus watched the men approach. The lead man was enormous, a towering figure with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He stepped up to the rear window where Victoria was sitting. He didn't say a word. He swung the tire iron with terrifying force. The impact sent a shockwave through the glass, a spider web of cracks radiating out from the point of contact. But the window held. Reinforced ballistic glass. Victoria's breath came out in a rush. Thank God, it won't hold forever. Marcus was already scanning their surroundings. The bridge was gridlocked. Horns were blaring from every direction. Angry commuters were getting out of their cars to see what had caused the accident. That chaos was their only advantage. Listen to me, Marcus grabbed Sophie's backpack, his mind racing through options. We're going to get out on the street side into the traffic. We need to disappear into the crowd. We can't. Victoria's voice shook. We're safer in here. The second blow to the window sent a louder crack through the glass. The man outside grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. He was enjoying this. If they get in, they take Sophie. Do you understand? They will take her. Victoria's face hardened. The fear vanished, replaced by the same steel she used to crush competitors in boardrooms across 3 continents. What do we do? On my count, I'm kicking the left door open. You take Sophie's hand. You do not let go. We run for the pedestrian walkway. Ready. Victoria grabbed Sophie's small hands so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ready. 1, 2, 3. Marcus threw his shoulder against the left door. It was jammed from the impact, the frame bent inward. But adrenaline was a powerful thing. He kicked it once, twice, and on the third kick it groaned open. The noise of the rain and traffic roared in along with the angry shouts of drivers. Go! Victoria scrambled out, pulling Sophie with her. They stepped onto the wet asphalt, narrowly missing a yellow taxi that skidded to a halt, tires screeching. Hey, watch it! The cabbie leaned on his horn, but Victoria didn't even flinch. Marcus jumped out after them, glancing back. The men on the other side of the car had realized their prey was loose. They were vaulting over the hood of the Maybach, their boots thudding against run. Marcus's command was simple, absolute. He grabbed Sophie's other hand, and together he and Victoria swung the girl over a concrete barrier and onto the pedestrian path that ran along the edge of the bridge. They sprinted. Marcus wasn't a runner. He was a father who ate leftovers and worried about bills and hadn't been to a gym in 5 years. But fear was fuel. He ran with a focus that blurred everything except the path ahead and the small hand in his. There, get them! A voice roared behind them, rough and angry. Heavy boots pounded the pavement, gaining ground. Victoria was struggling in her remaining heel. She stumbled, crying out as her ankle twisted beneath her weight. She fell to one knee, the wet concrete tearing through her white slacks. I can't. The words came out as a gasp, defeat creeping into her voice. Marcus stopped. He didn't hesitate. He scooped Sophie up into his left arm, the girl's weight barely registering, and grabbed Victoria with his right hand, hauling her upright. Take your shoes off, now. What Victoria stared at him, disbelief cutting through the pain. Take them off, now. Victoria kicked off her remaining heel, Italian leather, probably $2,000 now, lying in a puddle of oil and rainwater. She stood in her stocking feet on the freezing, gritty concrete, wincing. Move. They ran again. But the men were close now, maybe 20 feet back. Marcus saw a narrow maintenance stairwell leading down from the bridge to Roosevelt Island below. It was gated, the entrance sealed with a rusted padlock in a chain-link fence. Not an exit, a trap. But it was the only option. Daddy, I'm scared. Sophie buried her face in his neck, her small body trembling. Marcus tightened his grip. It's okay, baby. Close your eyes. He reached the gate. The padlock was old, corroded by years of rain and salt air, but it was still locked. He didn't have a key. He didn't have a lockpick. He had a worn leather portfolio filled with rejection letters and a resume no one wanted. He looked back. The lead attacker was 10 feet away, his hand reaching into his jacket. A gun. Marcus had seconds. He spotted a loose metal pipe lying in a pile of construction debris near the railing. He grabbed it, his fingers closing around the cold, wet steel, and jammed it into the chain-link loop of the fence. Leverage. He remembered this from his days at Kincaid Logistics, working the loading docks, breaking open jammed shipping containers. Physics didn't care about desperation, only about force and angles. He twisted with every ounce of rage and fear he'd suppressed for 3 years. The metal groaned. The attacker lunged forward, his hand emerging from his jacket with a black shape. Snap. The lock broke. Marcus kicked the gate open, shoved Victoria and Sophie through, and slammed it shut just as the attacker crashed into it from the other side. The impact sent vibrations through Marcus's arms. He jammed the pipe through the gate handles, barring it from the inside. The man on the other side screamed, shaking the fence with both hands. Open this! Open it now! Marcus didn't answer. He turned to Victoria, who was pale and bleeding from her feet, the thin stockings shredded by broken glass and gravel. Down the stairs. Don't stop until we hit the ground. They descended into the darkness beneath the bridge, the sound of the rain masking the curses of the men above. Victoria's feet left bloody prints on the concrete steps. Sophie whimpered but didn't cry. Marcus counted steps 30, 40, 50, until they emerged on the lower level, a maintenance access road that ran beneath the bridge supports. They were alive. But for the first time in his life, Marcus Harper wasn't just unemployed. He was a hunted man. It took them 2 hours to get back to Astoria. They took 3 different subway lines, doubling back twice to make sure they weren't followed. Marcus used the last of his cash, $17.32, to buy oversized hoodies from a street vendor to cover Victoria's ruined suit and Sophie's raincoat. The hoodies were cheap polyester, the kind that smelled like chemicals, and fell apart after one wash, but they worked. By the time they reached the nondescript brick building on 34th Street, night had fallen completely, the streetlights casting long shadows across empty sidewalks. This is it, Victoria's voice was weak, exhausted. She looked at the peeling paint of the entryway, the graffiti on the mailboxes, the broken buzzer panel. It's not your penthouse, but it's off the grid. The lease is in my cousin's name because my credit is shot. No one will look for a billionaire here. Marcus unlocked the side door that led to the basement. The stairs were steep and narrow, the walls damp with condensation. He ushered them inside. The apartment was small, a studio converted into a one-bedroom with drywall partitions that didn't reach the ceiling. It smelled of dampness and the detergent he used to wash their clothes in the bathtub. The furniture was mismatched, clearly salvaged from thrift stores and sidewalks, but it was meticulously clean. There were drawings on the fridge, stick figures of Marcus and Sophie, holding hands, a yellow sun in the corner, the words, "I love Daddy," in crooked letters. There were books stacked everywhere, library books they couldn't afford to buy. It was poor, but it was a home. Sophie, go change into your pajamas. Brush your teeth, then get in bed. I'll make us some toast. Can I have the strawberry jam? Sophie's voice was small, but there was a flicker of normalcy returning the resilience of childhood. Double jam, Marcus promised, forcing a smile he didn't feel. Sophie disappeared behind the curtain that separated the sleeping area from the rest of the apartment. Marcus turned to Victoria. She was standing in the middle of the kitchen, shivering uncontrollably despite the hoodie. She looked at the linoleum floor with its worn patches, the leaky faucet that dripped with rhythmic persistence, the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. "Sit down." Marcus pulled out a wooden chair, one of two that didn't match at the small table. Victoria sat heavily as if her legs had finally given out. She looked like a ghost hair matted face pale, the fierce CEO replaced by someone fragile and broken. "I'm sorry." The words came out as a whisper barely audible. Marcus paused, holding a loaf of bread. It was the cheap white kind on sale for 99 cents, already starting to go stale. "For what?" "For everything." Victoria gestured around the room, her hands shaking. "For the way you were treated at my company, for dragging you into this, for thinking that money could fix this." Her voice cracked on the last word. Marcus put the bread down. He went to the bathroom cabinet and retrieved a first aid kit, a plastic box with a faded red cross half empty. He sat down opposite her and began cleaning the cut on her forehead with antiseptic. She winced but didn't pull away. "You weren't useless. When we ran, you held on to her. You didn't let go." Victoria looked at him, surprised by the kindness in his voice. "Who were those men? And don't tell me you don't know." Victoria sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I have a cousin, Graham. Graham Blackwell, my father's brother's son. He's always believed the company should be his. But my father left the controlling interest to me and Isabel. 50-50, but Isabel disappeared." Marcus applied a bandage to the cut, his fingers gentle despite the tremor in his hands. "Exactly. As long as she was missing, her shares were held in a trust unvoted. That gave me effective control. But the trust has a clause. If Isabel died, her shares would pass to her issue, her child." Marcus's blood ran cold. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. Sophie. Yes, if Sophie is proven to be the heir, she inherits 50% of a $200 billion company. I would act as her proxy until she's 18. Graham would be locked out forever. And if Sophie isn't in the picture, Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands had balled into fists. "Then the shares revert to the general family pool. Graham has bought off the other cousins over the years. If the shares revert, he takes control. He liquidates the company, sells it for parts, walks away with billions. So he wants to kill a 6-year-old girl for money." Marcus stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "He wants to eliminate a threat, and he probably tracked me. He knew I found your resume. He knew I was going to the school. He called me in the car. He knew who I was." Marcus paced the small kitchen, his mind racing. "Graham has ears everywhere, even in my security detail. Roger." Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper, the betrayal cutting deeper than the physical injuries. "We can't stay here. If he has ears everywhere, he'll find this place eventually. We need to go to the police. Graham owns the police commissioner. We can't trust anyone. Not until I can get to the board meeting tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, the annual shareholder meeting, 9 a.m. If I walk in there with Sophie with proof of her DNA, I can lock the trust. I can expose Graham publicly. Once it's public, he can't touch her. The media scrutiny would be too high, so we just have to survive the night and get into the most secure building in New York, which will be surrounded by Graham's men." Marcus stopped pacing. He looked at the curtain where Sophie was sleeping, her soft breathing the only sound of innocence left in the room. He looked at his worn-out shoes, at the holes in the soles. He looked at the billionaire sitting in his kitchen wearing a hoodie that said, "I love Noi." "I used to work in logistics. I know how to move precious cargo through hostile territory. But we're going to need help, and we're going to need to get dirty. I don't care." Victoria stood wincing at the pain in her feet. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'm done being the ice queen tonight. I'm an ant." Marcus nodded. He picked up his cracked phone, the screen spiderweb, but still functional, and dialed a number from memory. "Hey, Jake. Yeah, it's Marcus. I know I owe you $20. Look, I need a favor. A big one. How many of the guys from the old crew are free tonight? Tell them to bring their trucks, all of them." He hung up. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Who is Jake? Jake Morrison runs the sanitation fleet for Queens, garbage trucks. If you want to get into that building unseen, we're going to have to take out the trash. Just then a heavy pounding shook the front door of the building upstairs. The sound reverberated through the walls, followed by a voice and amplified by authority. Police, open up. We have a warrant for Marcus Harper for the kidnapping of Sophie Harper. Marcus stared at the ceiling, his jaw clenching. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Kidnapping? She's my daughter. Graham flipped the narrative. Victoria's voice was tight with fury. If the police take you, they hand Sophie over to child services, and Graham's men will intercept her before she even gets to the foster home. The pounding got louder, more insistent. Bang, bang, bang. The door upstairs was reinforced. The landlord had installed it after a break-in 2 years ago, but it wouldn't hold forever. We can't go out the front, Marcus whispered urgently. He grabbed the heavy metal handle of the basement window, the tiny rectangular opening that looked out at street level, currently blocked by a metal grate bolted into the brick. Can we fit? Victoria's eyes widened as she looked at the narrow gap. We have to. Wake Sophie. Don't let her cry. Victoria moved quickly, slipping behind the curtain. Marcus heard her gentle voice, soothing and calm, waking the little girl without panic. He gripped the grate and pulled. The bolts were old, rusted from years of moisture. They groaned but held. Marcus braced his foot against the wall and pulled harder. One bolt popped free, then another. The sound of a battering ram hitting the door upstairs echoed through the building, a deep, rhythmic boom that shook dust from the ceiling. We're through. Victoria emerged with Sophie in her arms, the girl's eyes wide but quiet. Marcus pushed the grate aside and squeezed through the window, first emerging in the alleyway behind the building. It was a river of mud and refuse, the rain still falling in sheets. He reached back through and pulled Sophie out, then helped Victoria. Her feet hit the ground and she gasped in pain, but she didn't stop moving. Marcus pushed the grate back into place as best he could. Above them, the sound of splintering wood signaled the door giving way. This way. Marcus led them through the shadows, hopping fences and ducking behind dumpsters, moving with a knowledge of these streets that came from years of walking them broke and desperate. They cut through backyards and narrow alleys until they reached an old industrial lot under the highway overpass 3 blocks away. 3 massive sanitation trucks were idling there, their diesel engines rumbling like sleeping beasts. A man stepped out from the lead truck. Jake Morrison was a giant 6'4" with forearms the size of tree trunks and a face that had seen every rough corner of Queens. He squinted at Marcus, then at the woman in the mud-stained hoodie carrying a small child. Marcus, you look like hell. And you brought guests, Jake. We need a ride into the city, specifically to the loading dock of Blackwell Industries Tower. Jake laughed, a gravelly sound that came from deep in his chest. Blackwell Tower, you know the security there. They scan the delivery guys for cavities. We just pick up the compactor trash from the sub-basement. Exactly. Victoria stepped forward, her voice holding the unmistakable ring of command despite her appearance. They scan people. They don't scan the refuse. Jake raised an eyebrow, his gaze shifting to Victoria with new interest. And who is she, the Queen of Sheba? She's the owner of the building. And if you get us inside, she'll make sure your entire crew retires in Florida. Jake looked at Victoria's intense blue eyes. He looked at the police sirens wailing in the distance, getting closer to Marcus's apartment. He spat on the ground, a gesture of consideration. Get in the back of number 2. It's empty, but it ain't a limo. Smelled like fish guts yesterday. I don't care if it smells like death. Victoria's response was immediate, her jaw set. Just get us there by 6 a.m. The ride was a nightmare. The interior of the garbage hopper was dark, cold, and smelled of rot, a combination of decomposing food, sour milk, and something Marcus couldn't identify and didn't want to. He held Sophie tight, shielding her nose with his jacket. Victoria sat on a mound of dry cardboard boxes, her knees pulled to her chest, shivering. The truck bounced over potholes, each jolt sending pain through Victoria's bruised body. I'm sorry. Marcus's voice cut through the darkness as the truck lurched over a particularly bad stretch of road. This isn't exactly first class. It's better than the alternative. Victoria's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the tremor beneath it. Marcus, yeah, why didn't you sell the locket? I saw it. It's solid silver, antique. You could have gotten a few $100s, maybe more. Marcus stroked Sophie's hair. the girl's breathing slow and even against his chest. She'd fallen asleep despite the smell, exhausted beyond fear. Rachel gave it to me. She said it was the only thing she had from her past. I didn't know it was worth money. I just knew it was hers. I would have starved before I sold it. In the darkness, Victoria reached out and found Marcus's hand. She squeezed it not romantically, but as a pact, a recognition of a shared fierce loyalty to the same ghost. Neither of them spoke again until the truck hissed to a halt. "We're here." Jake's voice crackled over a tinny intercom built into the wall of the hopper. "Showtime." The truck was stopped at the security gate of Blackwell Tower. They heard the heavy mechanical whine of the gates opening, then a guard's voice, bored and routine. "Sanitation. IDs on the dish. You're early, Marco." The guard sounded suspicious now. "Pop the back. Standard protocol." Marcus froze. He pulled Sophie deeper into the shadows behind a pile of black bags, his hand over her mouth, not to silence her, but to shield her from breathing in the fumes. Victoria pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. "Come on, Jerry?" Jake's voice was loud, annoyed, playing the part perfectly. "It's pouring rain. The mechanism's jammed. If I open it, I gotta reset the hydraulics manually. You want me blocking your bay for 20 minutes? There was a pause. The tension in the dark container was suffocating. Sophie stirred in Marcus's arms and he held her tighter, willing her to stay asleep. "Fine, go on through, but make it quick. The suits are arriving early for some big meeting." The truck rolled forward into the building. The darkness swallowed them again as they entered the underground loading bay. When the truck stopped, Jake banged on the side. "All clear. You got 3 minutes before the shift change." Marcus kicked the latch open. They tumbled out onto the concrete floor of the sub-basement. It was clean, brightly lit, and smelled of industrial cleaning chemicals, a stark contrast to the filth they'd just endured. They looked insane. Marcus was smeared with grease and something brown he didn't want to identify. Victoria had a banana peel stuck to her elbow. Sophie looked like a refugee from a disaster zone. "Service elevator." Victoria whispered, pointing to a gray set of doors partially hidden behind a support column. "It goes straight to the penthouse level." "But we need a key card. I don't have one." Marcus looked around frantically, searching for another option. "I do." Victoria reached into her shoe, the one she'd been carrying since she kicked it off. She pulled out the key card she dropped in the elevator earlier, the one she'd retrieved before the crash. It was cracked, bent, the magnetic strip scratched, but the chip might still work. She swiped it. The light turned green. Going up. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a pristine interior with mirrored walls. Victoria stepped in first, followed by Marcus carrying Sophie. As the doors closed, sealing them away from the loading dock, Marcus caught his reflection. He looked like he'd been through a war. Victoria looked worse, but Sophie, still asleep in his arms, looked peaceful. The elevator began to rise. Marcus leaned against the wall, his legs finally giving out. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor, Sophie cradled in his lap. Victoria sat next to him, her shoulder touching his. Neither of them spoke. They were too tired for words. But in that silence, something shifted. Victoria's head tilted, resting against Marcus's shoulder. He didn't pull away. The warmth of her presence, the shared exhaustion and terror, created a bond that went beyond circumstance. "When this is over, what are you going to do?" Victoria's voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "If we survive, you mean?" Marcus's attempt at humor fell flat. "When we survive, what do you want? Really want?" Marcus looked down at Sophie's face, peaceful in sleep. "I want her to have a childhood, a real one. Birthday parties, friends, not worrying about whether we'll have heat next month. I want her to know she's safe. And you, what do you want?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I want to stop feeling like a failure. I want to look at myself in the mirror and not see a man who couldn't save his wife. I want a second chance at everything." Victoria lifted her head, looking at him with those piercing blue eyes. "You're not a failure, Marcus. You're the reason Sophie is alive. You're the reason I found my sister, even if it was too late. You're the reason we're still fighting. I'm just doing what any father would do." Number. Most people would have given up. Most people would have taken the easy way out, let the system take over, let someone else make the decisions. But you didn't. You fought. And that's why I trust you. The elevator slowed as it approached the penthouse level. Marcus stood lifting Sophie gently. Victoria stood as well, wincing as she put weight on her torn feet. Ready, Marcus asked. Ready. The doors opened onto a private hallway carpeted in deep burgundy, the walls lined with original artwork. It was a different world from the garbage truck, from the alley, from the basement apartment. This was Victoria's world, but she no longer belonged here. Not really, not after tonight. Victoria led them to her penthouse apartment. She unlocked the door with a fingerprint scanner, and they stepped inside. The space was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, a kitchen that gleamed with stainless steel appliances that had probably never been used. But it felt cold, empty. There were no photographs, no personal touches, nothing that indicated a human being actually lived here. Make yourself comfortable. I'll get some blankets. Victoria disappeared down a hallway. Marcus carried Sophie to a white leather sofa and laid her down, carefully removing her muddy shoes and covering her with his jacket. He stood in the middle of the living room, feeling completely out of place. His muddy footprints stained the white carpet. His hands left smudges on the glass coffee table. He was contaminating her pristine world. Victoria returned with blankets, towels, and a change of clothes, sweatpants, and a t-shirt that were clearly men's clothes, probably from some ex-boyfriend or business associate. She handed them to Marcus. Bathroom's down the hall. Shower if you want. I'll stay with Sophie. Marcus nodded and headed to the bathroom. It was larger than his entire apartment, with a walk-in shower that had multiple jets and a control panel that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. He stripped off his filthy clothes and stepped under the hot water. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. He let the water pound against his back, washing away the grime and the fear. And for the first time in hours, he let himself break. Silent tears mixed with the shower spray as the weight of everything crashed down on him. Rachel was gone. Sophie was in danger. And he was in way over his head. When he emerged 20 minutes later, clean but exhausted, he found Victoria in the kitchen. She changed into simple black leggings and a gray sweater, her hair wet from her own shower. She was making hot chocolate, real hot chocolate, not from a packet, melting actual chocolate in a pan with milk. Sophie was awake, sitting at the kitchen island, wrapped in a blanket, watching with wide eyes. Is this your house? Sophie's voice was filled with wonder. It is. Victoria smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Do you like it? It's really big, bigger than our apartment. Victoria's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered. Well, you're welcome here anytime. Always. She poured the hot chocolate into 3 mugs and handed them out. They sat together at the island, drinking in silence. It was nearly midnight. The DNA results wouldn't come until morning. The shareholder meeting was in 9 hours. They needed rest, but sleep felt impossible. Marcus's phone buzzed. He'd turned it off during the escape, but had powered it back on to check the time. Now there was an email notification. His heart stopped. The subject line read DNA test results. Priority. Victoria saw his face go pale. What is it? The DNA test. It's here. Marcus opened the email with shaking hands. Victoria moved to stand behind him, reading over his shoulder. Sophie sipped her hot chocolate, oblivious to the tension. The results loaded slowly, the connection spotty this high up in the building. Then the words appeared on the screen. Probability of biological relationship, 99.97%. Conclusion. Subject A, Victoria Blackwell, and Subject B, Sophie Harper, shared in a genetic marker consistent with aunt-niece relationship. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth, but saw him escaping despite her attempt to hold it back. Marcus set the phone down carefully as if it might explode. She's your niece. Legally, scientifically, undeniably. Victoria sank into the chair next to Marcus, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Sophie, who was watching the adults with confusion. Why is Aunt Victoria crying? Sophie's small voice cut through the moment. Because she's happy, sweetheart, Marcus managed to say, though his own voice was thick with emotion. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. Victoria's phone rang, shattering the fragile peace. She looked at the screen and her face went from joy to terror. In an instant, it's Graham, don't answer it. Marcus reached for the phone, but Victoria had already hit the green button. Her hand moving on autopilot, she raised the phone to her ear. Hello, Graham? Her voice was ice, the CEO returning. Hello, dear cousin. I heard you had quite the adventure today. Car accident on the Queensboro Bridge. How terrifying. I'm so glad you're safe. His voice was smooth mocking. Victoria put the phone on speaker so Marcus could hear. What do you want, Graham? "Oh, just checking in. I also heard some interesting news. Something about a DNA test. A long-lost niece, how convenient, Victoria. Right before the shareholder meeting. Almost too convenient. It's the truth." Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like fraud. A desperate attempt to hold on to power by producing a fake heir. I've already alerted the board to my concerns. They're quite interested in seeing actual proof tomorrow. Not just a piece of paper anyone could forge. We'll be there tomorrow. With Sophie. With the proof, and you'll be finished, Graham. Victoria's hand was shaking despite her strong words. Graham laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. You can try, but you won't make it past the lobby. I've already arranged additional security. They'll be very thorough with anyone trying to enter the building tomorrow, especially anyone trying to sneak in through, say, the loading dock. The line went dead. Victoria stared at the phone, her face ashen. He knows. He knows our plan. He's already setting up for tomorrow. Roger? Marcus's voice was flat, certain. He told Graham everything. He probably told him about the test about Sophie, about our escape route. That's how those men found us so fast. Victoria closed her eyes, the betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. 10 years. I trusted him for 10 years. Money buys employees. Loyalty has to be earned. Marcus stood, his mind already working through alternatives. We can't use the loading dock. We need another way in, and we need to move tonight. If Graham knows we're here, he'll send people. Where can we go? Every place I own, every hotel, every friend, he'll think of them all. Then we go somewhere he won't think to look. Somewhere a billionaire would never be caught dead. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed Jake's number again. Jake, it's Marcus again. I need another favor. You still have that warehouse by the docks, the abandoned one. Can we crash there tonight? Just until morning, Jake's response was immediate. Brother, you don't even have to ask. I'll meet you there in 20. And Marcus, I'm bringing some of the guys. If someone's after you, you're going to need backup. Marcus hung up and looked at Victoria. Get Sophie's things. We're leaving. Now, they gathered what little they had, Sophie's backpack, the DNA results printed out, Victoria's phone and wallet. As they headed for the door, Victoria paused, looking back at her penthouse. The perfect, pristine cage she'd built for herself. I thought this was what mattered. The money, the power, the control. Her voice was soft, reflective. And now Marcus asked Sophie, half asleep in his arms again. Now I'd trade it all for what you have. Family, real family. You have that now, if you want it. Marcus held out his free hand. Victoria looked at it for a moment, then took it. They left the penthouse together, stepping back into the elevator, descending toward an uncertain future, but no longer alone. Jake had cleared a space in the back corner of the warehouse, setting up camping chairs and a portable heater that glowed orange in the darkness. 5 other men were there, former colleagues from Marcus's logistics days, men who'd been laid off during the recession and rebuilt their lives driving trucks, working docks, doing the pause that kept the city running while no one noticed. They sat in a loose circle, drinking coffee from thermoses, smoking cigarettes, their faces weathered by hard years. Sophie was asleep on a makeshift bed of blankets in the corner, her breathing steady and peaceful. Victoria sat on an overturned crate, her designer clothes replaced by borrowed jeans and a flannel shirt that hung loose on her frame. She looked more human than she had in the penthouse. No makeup, hair tied back in a simple ponytail, feet bandaged with medical tape Jake had produced from his truck's first aid kit. Marcus stood near the heater, warming his hands, his mind working through the problem. Jake had spread a blueprint of Blackwell Tower across a workbench, an old schematic from a renovation project 5 years ago. Security's tightest at the main entrance. 3 checkpoints, metal detectors, facial recognition. Jake tapped the blueprint with a grimy finger. But the service dock has a blind spot. Right here. The camera angle doesn't cover the northwest corner for about 15 seconds during the automated gate cycle. 15 seconds isn't enough to get 3 people through. That's why we're not going through as people. Marcus traced a route with his finger. The compactor truck empties at 6 a.m. every morning. The guards know the drivers, but they don't inspect the load. It's garbage. Who inspects garbage? You want to ride in the back again? Victoria's voice held a note of disbelief. It's the only way Graham won't see coming. He's expecting us to try something bold, something worthy of a billionaire CEO. He's not expecting us to literally hide in the trash. One of Jake's friends, a man named Tommy with tattoos covering his arms, spoke up. I can drive. Used to do the Blackwell route before they switched to automated collection. I know the guards. They'll wave me through. What about getting out once you're inside? Victoria was leaning forward now, engaged despite her exhaustion. The hopper empties into a compactor room on the sub-basement level. There's a service corridor that leads to the maintenance elevator. From there, we can access any floor without going through main security. Marcus's knowledge of the building's infrastructure came from months of studying it before his interview, memorizing every detail in the desperate hope that preparation would somehow make up for his resume gap. And the timing, Victoria checked her phone. The meeting starts at 9. We need to be in position by 8:45 at the latest. That gives us 2 hours and 45 minutes from the time we enter the building. Plenty of time to get cleaned up and presentable. Marcus tried to sound confident, but the weight of what they were attempting pressed down on him. Jake pulled a duffel bag from behind the workbench and unzipped it. Inside were clean clothes, a suit for Marcus, slightly worn but well-maintained, and a professional dress for Victoria, simple and elegant. My sister works at a hotel. I called in a favor. These were left behind by guests who never claimed them. Should fit close enough. Victoria reached out and took Jake's hand, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. I don't know how to thank you, any of you. You're risking everything for people you barely know. Jake shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Marcus helped me when I needed it. Didn't ask questions, didn't judge. Just gave me a chance when everyone else saw an ex-con not worth the risk. We take care of our own. That's how it works down here. Victoria looked around at the circle of men, these invisible workers who kept the city functioning while people like her made billions off their labor. She'd never truly seen them before. Now she couldn't look away. If we survive, these things are going to change at Blackwell Industries. Starting wages, benefits, respect. Real respect. Don't make promises you can't keep. Tommy's voice was hard skeptical. I've heard that speech before from suits. It never amounts to anything. I'm not making promises. I'm making a commitment. And Marcus will make sure I keep it. He'll be my chief operating officer, no. His first job will be to audit every department and tell me where we're failing our workers. Marcus turned to look at her, surprise registering on his face. I don't have an MBA. I don't have executive experience. You have something better. You know what it's like to work until your hands bleed and still not have enough for rent. You know what it's like to be invisible. That's the perspective I need. That's the perspective the company needs. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the warehouse entrance. Two figures stumbled in from the rain. Roger and another man Marcus didn't recognize. Roger's face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. He was limping, supported by his companion. Ms. Blackwell, Roger's voice was rough-pained. I need to speak with you. Please. Victoria stood, her body tensing. Marcus moved to intercept, positioning himself between Roger and Victoria. You've got some nerve showing up here. How much did Graham pay you to betray her? Nothing. Roger sagged against the doorframe, his companion, a younger man in a paramedic's uniform, helping him stay upright. He didn't pay me. He threatened my son. Mason has leukemia. He needs experimental treatment that insurance won't cover. Graham found out. He said he'd make sure Mason got into the trial at Johns Hopkins. All I had to do was keep him informed about your movements, Ms. Blackwell. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Victoria's face softened, the anger draining away. She stepped around Marcus and approached Roger. Why are you here now? Because I told him where you were heading tonight. And then I realized what I'd done, what it would mean for that little girl. So I went to Graham's office to confront him, to tell him I was done. Roger gestured to his battered face. He made his position clear. Then I made mine. I recorded him, Ms. Blackwell, admitting to the attempted murder, to bribing the police commissioner, all of it. It's on my phone and I'm giving it to you. Roger pulled out his phone with shaking hands and offered it to Victoria. She took it, her fingers closing around the device. This changes everything. With this recording, we can have Graham arrested before the meeting even starts. Number. Marcus's voice was firm. If we move too early, his lawyers will bury it. He'll claim it was taken under duress, that Roger is lying for revenge after being fired. We need to expose him publicly in front of the board, in front of the media. The recording is insurance, but we still need to do this right. Victoria nodded slowly, understanding the strategy. Roger, your son, does he have what he needs? Roger's good eye filled with tears. I don't know. I burned that bridge when I walked away from Graham. Victoria pulled out her phone and made a call. It was answered on the second ring. Dr. Chen, this is Victoria Blackwell. I need a favor. I have a patient, Mason Fletcher, pediatric leukemia. I want him in the Johns Hopkins trial tomorrow. Pull whatever strings you need to pull. Send me the bill. She hung up and looked at Roger. It's done. Your son gets his treatment, and you get to be there for him instead of in a jail cell. But I need you to testify when this is over. The truth? All of it. Roger nodded, unable to speak. His companion helped him to a chair, and one of Jake's friends brought him water. The hours before dawn crawled by. Marcus tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound made him jump. Was it Graham's men, the police? He sat next to Sophie, watching her sleep, memorizing the peaceful expression on her face. If this went wrong, if he didn't survive tomorrow, he wanted this to be his last memory. Not fear, not violence, just his daughter safe and dreaming. Victoria found him there at 4:30 in the morning. She sat down on the floor next to him, their shoulders touching. I keep thinking about what Isabel's last days must have been like. Was she scared? Did she regret leaving? Did she wish she'd reached out to me? Marcus chose his words carefully. Rachel talked about her childhood sometimes. Not often, but when she did, she always mentioned a sister. She never said your name, but I knew there was someone she missed, someone she loved but couldn't contact. She said that loving someone sometimes means letting them go, letting them build their own life without the weight of your mistakes. I could have saved her. If she'd just called me, just sent a letter, I could have gotten her the best oncologist in the world. Money doesn't buy time. When Rachel was in the hospital, she didn't wish for more money or better doctors. She wished for one more day with Sophie, one more morning to make breakfast, one more bedtime story. She had what she wanted, a life on her own terms, a family built on love, not obligation. Don't take that away from her by turning it into a tragedy. Victoria absorbed this, her breathing evening out. Then she asked the question that had been haunting her. What happens after? If we win, if Sophie is safe, what happens to us, to you and me? Marcus didn't answer immediately. The question was complicated, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to fully explore. We figure it out. Together, no more running, no more hiding. We face whatever comes next as a family. A strange, complicated, messy family. But family. Victoria's hand found his in the darkness, and they sat like that until Jake announced it was time to go. The pre-dawn streets of New York were empty, the city holding its breath before the daily chaos began. Marcus, Victoria, and Sophie climbed into the back of the garbage truck, the metal walls cold and unforgiving. This time, there was less refuse, just the tail end of the night's collection, but the smell was still overwhelming. Sophie buried her face in Marcus's chest, her small hands clutching his shirt. It's going to be okay, baby. Just a little while longer. Can you be brave for Daddy? Sophie nodded, her voice muffled. Like Mommy was brave, Marcus's throat tightened. Just like Mommy. Tommy drove with the steady confidence of someone who'd made this route 1,000 times. The truck rumbled through empty streets, past closed storefronts, and sleeping homeless people huddled in doorways. As they approached Blackwell Tower, the sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky, turning it from black to deep purple. The security gate loomed ahead. Tommy slowed, rolling down his window as a guard approached. It was a different guard from yesterday, younger with a clipboard and a thermos of coffee. Morning, Tommy. Early start today. Yeah, trying to beat the rain. Supposed to pour again by 7. The guard glanced at his clipboard. You're not on the schedule for today. Marcus's heart stopped. In the back of the truck, he and Victoria exchanged panicked looks. This wasn't part of the plan. Really, that's weird. I got the call last night. Emergency pickup. Something about extra waste from a board meeting. The guard frowned, checking his clipboard again. Let me call it in. He reached for his radio. In the back of the truck, Marcus prepared to kick the door open, to run, to fight whatever it took. But then another voice crackled over the guard's radio. Let him through. We authorize the pickup. Graham Blackwell's office called it in personally. The guard shrugged and waved Tommy through. The truck rolled forward, passing through the gate. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Graham had unwittingly helped them. He'd added security everywhere except the one place he considered beneath notice: the garbage. The truck backed up to the loading dock. Tommy activated the hydraulic lift, and the hopper tilted. Marcus, Victoria, and Sophie slid down the metal chute into the compactor room, landing on a pile of cardboard boxes that cushioned their fall. The room was dim, lit by a single flickering fluorescent light. The stench was overwhelming, but they were in. Elevators that way. Marcus pointed to a door partially hidden behind industrial shelving. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the concrete space. The elevator was old, a freight lift meant for moving equipment and supplies. Marcus hit the button for the 15th floor, high enough to be above the main security presence, but low enough not to trigger attention. The elevator groaned upward, the cables creaking with each floor. When it stopped, they emerged into a maintenance corridor. It was 6:15. They had 2.5 hours. Marcus led them to a janitorial closet he'd noticed during his interview visit. Inside were cleaning supplies, mops, and crucially, a small bathroom with a sink and mirror. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Victoria washed first, scrubbing the grime from her face and hands with hand soap that smelled like fake lemons. She changed into the dress Jake had provided, a simple navy sheath dress that fit reasonably well, though it was slightly too long. She used her fingers to comb her wet hair into some semblance of order, then pinned it back with bobby pins from her purse that had somehow survived the night's chaos. Marcus cleaned up next the suit Jake had given him, fitting surprisingly well. It was older, the style, from a few years back, but it was clean and pressed. He used the small mirror to straighten his collar, his hands shaking slightly. When was the last time he'd worn a suit for anything other than rejection? His wedding, Rachel's funeral, job interviews that led nowhere. Now this, the most important meeting of his life. Sophie was last. Victoria helped her wash, gently cleaning her face and hands, combing her hair with a small comb from the janitor's supply closet. The girl's yellow raincoat was beyond saving, so Victoria wrapped her in a clean towel from the closet, making it look almost like a shawl. "You look like a princess." Victoria smiled and Sophie giggled. "A princess who smells like garbage, not for long." "Come here." Victoria sprayed some air freshener, pine-scented institutional, over all of them. It wasn't perfume, but it masked the worst of the smell. They were as presentable as they were going to get under the circumstances. At 8:40, they took the service elevator up to the 50th floor. The corridor outside the boardroom was already filling with people, shareholders, lawyers, journalists with cameras and recorders. The annual meeting was always well attended, but this year there was extra buzz. Rumors of a hostile takeover. Questions about Victoria's competence. Speculation about this company's future. Graham stood near the boardroom entrance, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He was talking to a group of board members, gesturing with his hands, playing the concerned family member. When he saw Victoria emerge from the service elevator, his expression flickered, surprise, then calculation, then a smile that never reached his eyes. "Victoria, there you are. We were worried when you didn't respond to any calls last night. Are you all right? You look rather disheveled." The barb was delivered with surgical precision, designed to undermine her authority in front of the board members. Victoria didn't flinch. She straightened her spine, channeling every ounce of the Ice Queen persona that had made her feared across Wall Street. "I'm perfectly fine, Graham. Just dealing with some family matters. May I introduce you to Marcus Harper and his daughter?" Sophie. Marcus stepped forward, his hand protectively on Sophie's shoulder. Graham's eyes flickered down to the child, and something cold and reptilian passed through his gaze. Ah yes, the mysterious heir. How convenient, right before a crucial shareholder meeting. Convenient. Victoria's voice could have cut glass. "My sister died 3 years ago, alone and sick, because she was too afraid to reach out to her own family." "There's nothing convenient about that, Graham." Of course, of course. My apologies. I'm sure your evidence will speak for itself during the meeting, assuming it's legitimate. The board members were watching this exchange with rapt attention. Marcus could see them sizing up the situation, trying to determine which side to support. Graham was playing this perfectly, sowing doubt, making Victoria seem desperate and irrational. "It's legitimate. DNA doesn't lie." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "And neither do I. Sophie is Isabel Blackwell's daughter. She's the rightful heir, and we're here to claim what's hers. Graham's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Well then, this should be an interesting meeting. Shall we? He gestured toward the boardroom doors. It was 9 o'clock. The moment of truth had arrived. The boardroom was exactly as Marcus had imagined from his brief glimpse during the interview, a massive table of polished mahogany leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Manhattan that made you feel like a god looking down on mortals. 20 people sat around the table, board members, major shareholders, legal counsel. At the far end, a camera crew was setting up. The meeting would be live-streamed to shareholders who couldn't attend in person. Graham took his seat at the head of the table, assuming the position of chairman with practiced ease. Victoria moved to challenge him, but Graham spoke first. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this emergency session of the Blackwell Industries Board of Directors. As you know, there have been some unusual developments regarding company ownership in the line of succession. Before we proceed with standard business, we need to address the elephant in the room. He gestured toward Victoria, Marcus, and Sophie, who stood near the entrance. Ms. Blackwell claims to have discovered the daughter of her deceased sister Isabel. If true, this would have significant implications for company ownership and control. However, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Victoria, would you like to present your case? Victoria walked to the center of the room, her head high despite the exhaustion that pulled at her shoulders. Marcus followed, carrying Sophie. The little girl's eyes were wide, taking in the intimidating space and the stern faces around the table. Members of the board, my sister Isabel disappeared 15 years ago. Our father attempted to force her into marriage with David Morrison, a man who had assaulted her. Rather than submit, she ran. She changed her name to Rachel Daniels. She built a life in Queens. She married Marcus Harper and had a daughter. This daughter is Sophie Harper. Victoria placed the DNA test results on the table, sliding them toward the center where everyone could see. These are DNA results from an independent laboratory confirming that Sophie and I share genetic markers consistent with an aunt-niece relationship. Probability 99.97%. Sophie is Isabel's daughter. She is the rightful heir to Isabel's 50% stake in this company. Murmurs rippled around the table. Graham leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Interesting. And where exactly did you obtain this DNA sample? Under what circumstances? Victoria hesitated just for a moment, but it was enough. I approached Mr. Harper and explained the situation. We conducted the test with his full consent. Graham pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. An image appeared on the large monitor mounted on the wall, Victoria chasing Marcus down Fifth Avenue in the rain, her hair wild, her expression manic. This doesn't look like a calm, consensual conversation. This looks like harassment, like a desperate woman chasing down a struggling single father with wild claims about billions of dollars. Tell me, Victoria, did you offer Mr. Harper money to cooperate with this scheme, to produce a child who could conveniently solve your succession problem? The accusation hung in the air, poisonous and effective. Marcus felt the board member's eyes shift toward him, suspicion replacing curiosity. Nobody offered me anything. Marcus's voice cut through the murmurs. I didn't even know who Victoria Blackwell was when she first approached me. All I knew was that my wife had died, my daughter was growing up without a mother, and I was trying to survive. The truth is, my wife never told me about her family. She never told me she was an heir to anything. She just wanted to be loved for herself, not for some name or fortune, and that's exactly what I gave her. Pretty speech. Graham's tone was patronizing. But it doesn't change the fundamental question, is this real or is it an elaborate fraud? Because I have evidence that suggests the latter. He tapped the tablet again. A video began to play on the monitor, grainy dated footage from what looked like a bar or nightclub. A young woman was visible, stumbling, clearly intoxicated, being helped out by friends. The timestamp showed a date from 16 years ago. This is Isabel Blackwell at age 19, 6 months before she disappeared. As you can see, she had significant substance abuse issues. Our father tried to get her help, but she refused. She ran away from treatment, from her family, from her responsibilities. This is not the behavior of a responsible person. This is the behavior of someone who would abandon her family and die alone, leaving behind a child she could barely care for. The cruelty of the words landed like physical blows. Marcus felt his anger surge white-hot and overwhelming. How dare this man speak about Rachel like that? How dare he reduce her complex, beautiful life to a few moments of teenage rebellion? She was 17 years sober when I met her. Marcus's voice shook with barely controlled rage. 17 years. She went to meetings twice a week. She helped other people get clean. She was the best mother anyone could ask for, and she fought her cancer with more courage than you'll ever possess. She didn't die because she was weak or irresponsible. She died because life is cruel and unfair, and sometimes good people suffer while bastards like you thrive. Graham's expression hardened. Careful, Mr. Harper. Emotional outbursts won't help your case. The facts remain Isabel was troubled. She made poor choices. And now, conveniently, years after her death, a child appears claiming inheritance. The board deserves to know the full context before making any decisions about succession. Marcus took a step forward, his hands balling into fists. Victoria grabbed his arm, her grip firm. Don't let him bait you. That's what he wants. He wants you to lose control so he can paint you as unstable. Her whisper was urgent grounding. Marcus forced himself to breathe, to step back from the edge. Victoria addressed the board again. Graham is attempting to distract from the real issue. Yes, Isabel struggled as a teenager. Yes, she made mistakes. But she also survived. She built a life worth living. She found love. She raised a daughter. And that daughter is standing here today as proof of Isabel's strength, not her weakness. Victoria pulled an envelope from her purse, slightly crumpled, stained with rain, but intact. She opened it carefully and removed a letter. The paper yellowed with age, the handwriting graceful and looping. This is a letter Isabel wrote to me before she died. I found it among Rachel Harper's belongings. With the board's permission, I'd like to read it. She didn't wait for permission. She began to read, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Victoria, my dearest sister, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry for the 15 years of silence. I'm sorry for the worry I caused you, for the pain. But you must understand, I couldn't come back. Father was going to force me to marry David Morrison, a man who hurt me, who terrified me. I ran because I wanted to live, truly. Live, not just exist as Father's pawn in some business deal. I found Marcus. He's a good man, Victoria. The kind of man who loves without conditions, who gives without keeping score. We had Sophie, and she is the joy of my life, the reason I'm grateful for every single day, even the hard ones. I don't regret my choices. I only regret that I couldn't share them with you. Please, if you ever find us, protect Sophie. Love her the way I can't anymore. And if it's possible, forgive me. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Several board members were visibly moved, their professional facades cracking. Mr. Henderson, the oldest member of the board, cleared his throat. I remember David Morrison. I remember advising your father against that match, Victoria. The man was later arrested for domestic violence against his eventual wife. Isabel had every reason to run. Graham shifted in his seat, his confidence wavering. That's ancient history. The question now is about corporate governance. Even if we accept that Sophie is Isabel's daughter, she's 6 years old. She can't possibly manage a controlling interest in a $200 billion company. She won't have to. Victoria's voice was calm, now certain. I will serve as her proxy until she reaches 18, and I will have oversight to ensure her interests are protected. Marcus Harper will serve as Chief Operating Officer, providing perspective from someone who understands what our workers face, what our decisions actually mean on the ground level. A man who was unemployed 3 days ago. Graham scoffed. You want to hand operational control to someone with zero executive experience. I want to hand it to someone who knows the difference between profit and people. Someone who won't sacrifice the latter for the former. Someone who's proven he can manage impossible situations with limited resources. Yes, Graham, that man. Marcus felt Victoria's hand squeeze, his a silent message of solidarity. Mr. Henderson leaned forward. I move to recognize Sophie Harper as the legal heir of Isabel Blackwell's shares, with Victoria Blackwell serving as proxy until the child reaches majority. A younger board member, a woman named Patricia Chen, raised her hand. I second the motion. Graham stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a coup, a hostile takeover disguised as family reunion. I won't allow it. I have the votes to block this. I have allies on this board who understand that stability and experience matter more than sentiment. He looked around the table, expecting support. But the faces that looked back at him were uncertain, skeptical. Roger's recording had been sent to each board member's phone an hour before the meeting, anonymously, but with enough context to raise questions. They'd heard Graham's voice admitting to crimes, boasting about his plans. They knew who he really was now. The motion is on the floor. All in favor of recognizing Sophie Harper as Isabel Blackwell's heir. Mr. Henderson's voice was formal, procedural. Hands began to rise around the table. 1, 3, 7, 10, 12, 15, 18. Only 2 board members kept their hands down, Graham and his lone remaining ally, a man who looked profoundly uncomfortable. The motion passes. 18-2. Graham's face went pale, then red. He slammed his hand on the table. You'll regret this, all of you. I'll fight this in court. I'll tie this up for years. You'll do nothing. Victoria's voice was ice. Because the moment you walk out of this room, NYPD will arrest you for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder of a minor, and bribing a public official. We have recordings, Graham. We have testimony. We have evidence. Your game is over. On cue, the boardroom doors opened. 2 detectives in suits entered, badges visible on their belts, followed by uniformed officers. Graham Blackwell, you're under arrest. The lead detective's voice was matter-of-fact, bored, even as if arresting billionaires was routine. You have the right to remain silent. Graham's face crumbled, the mask of confidence shattering. He looked around the table, searching for allies, for escape, for anything. But there was nothing. The officers handcuffed him, and he was led from the room in stunned silence. As the doors closed behind him, the boardroom erupted in conversation. Shock relief, concerned about the company's future. Marcus felt his legs give out. He sank into the nearest chair, pulling Sophie onto his lap. The little girl looked up at him with those impossibly blue eyes. Are we safe now, Daddy? Marcus kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of cheap shampoo and childhood. Yeah, baby, we're safe now. 3 months later, Marcus sat in his new office reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant buzzed. A man in his mid-40s entered for an interview, his suit slightly too big, his resume showing a 5-year gap. My mother had Alzheimer's. I was her primary caregiver until she passed 2 years ago. I know it makes me look unreliable, but it makes you look human. Marcus interrupted gently. Caregiving is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Tell me about the most difficult crisis you handled during those 5 years. When the interview concluded, Marcus made his decision. Welcome to Blackwell Industries. When can you start? The man's eyes filled with tears. Really? Just like that? Just like that, everyone deserves a second chance. I should know. That evening, Marcus returned to his modest 2-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. He'd kept the old Astoria place as an office, a reminder of where he'd come from. Victoria and Sophie were already there. Victoria had a key now. Sophie was doing homework while Victoria attempted to cook dinner, the kitchen filled with smoke from something burning on the stove. How was your day? Victoria asked, waving a towel at the smoke detector. Good. Hired someone. Trevor would have laughed out of the building. And you're burning the chicken again. Marcus moved to rescue dinner, turning down the heat. I'm getting better though, right? You are. Last month you would have set off the sprinklers. Sophie looked up from her math homework. Can we have movie night? All 3 of us. Marcus looked at Victoria. She looked back at him and something passed between them. Not quite love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The foundation being laid brick by brick, day by day. Yeah, kiddo. Movie night. They settled on the couch, Sophie between them, her head on Marcus's shoulder, her feet in Victoria's lap. When Sophie fell asleep halfway through, Marcus carried her to bed. He returned to find Victoria by the window looking out at the city lights. Thank you. Victoria's voice was soft. For what? For showing me what matters. For these 3 months. For letting me be part of this. You are part of this. Your family. Victoria turned to face him. I spent my whole life building an empire because I thought it would make me invincible. But standing here with you and I feel richer than I ever did in the penthouse. How is that possible? Because wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in moments like this. In people who show up. In belonging. They stood together until Victoria headed home. At the door she paused. Same time tomorrow, After she left, Marcus walked to Sophie's room. She was sprawled across her bed, mouth slightly open. He adjusted her blanket and sat on the edge, watching her breathe. His mind drifted to Rachel. I kept my word. She's safe. She's happy. And I'm not giving up. I hope you're proud of me. He walked to his own room. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for tonight. Sweet dreams. He typed back, sweet dreams to you too. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow. There would be a tomorrow, and another after that. For the first time in years, Marcus Harper wasn't just surviving. He was living. He was building a future. He was home. The story of how a $2 bus fare and a father's love brought down a corrupt empire would be told in business schools for years to come. But the real story was quieter. It was about a man who walked into that building with nothing and walked out with everything that truly counted. It was about proving that your resume doesn't define your worth, your character does. It was a reminder that sometimes the person you reject today could be the one saving you tomorrow. But most of all, it was about family found in the most unlikely places, in the understanding that the strongest bonds aren't built on blood or money, but on showing up when it matters most.